My 9-year-old sister asked why we help people who can't help themselves, then poisoned our neighbor's cat to see what happens. When she made her first friend, Charlie. At 14, I found her suffocating him with a plastic bag on our couch. She told police he just stopped breathing and framed me as an unstable sibling who'd been stalking her. She got 7 years in psychiatric care after they found her journal, documenting how she'd been practicing on animals first. When my younger sister was 9, she looked up from her homework and asked me why we had to help people who couldn't help themselves. I was 16, stressed about SATs and stupid AF. Because that's what good people do, Emma, I muttered, before putting my headphones back on. She sat there for a moment longer before closing her notebook. I should have paid attention to the way she frowned. The signs started small. During family dinners, she'd point out which kids at school cried during gym class. She kept a notebook rating classmates by usefulness. I thought it was just weird kid stuff. Then Mr. Pinelli knocked on our door holding his tabby cat. It looked disgusting. Patchy fur, red eyes, blue tongue. That's when he said it. He had recovered security footage of Emma putting something into its food bowl in the back garden. My head immediately whipped around to Emma, expecting her to deny it. But no, instead, she stood there with a smirk on her face. I turned back to Mr. Pinelli, who now had tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry. Emma has a rare form of autism that we're trying to manage," I lied, before handing him $300 and closing the door. "Emma, what the actual F— What?" she blurted. "Don't blame me. It was already old as hell. I just wanted to see what would happen." That's when I knew this wasn't just childhood quirkiness, but our dad was out of the picture, and Mom worked 16 hours a day at the hospital. So naturally, the duty of raising her fell on me. The next morning, I did the most responsible thing ever. I went on a Barnes & Noble's shopping spree. I must have spent almost $150 on child development books and stayed up all night reading about conduct disorders. I didn't stop until I felt like I had enough information to be the next Mary Poppins. I always thought our first talk would be about puberty and intimacy. But no, it was about empathy and having basic care for others. I thought everything was going well until I finished, because that's when she tilted her head and asked, "So if natural selection is real, why do we keep the defective ones around?" The word defective made my skin crawl, but I knew I had no choice but to keep going, and keep going I did. I found a therapist who specialized in childhood behavioral issues. I enrolled her in softball, hoping team sports would teach cooperation. I even made her volunteer with me at the animal shelter, while keeping a close eye on her obviously LOL. For months, I got no complaints from teachers. She seemed engaged in therapy. Finally, I could breathe, or so I thought. I was in work one day when I got the call. It was Mrs. Perth, Emma's support group leader. Her voice was shaky. "I need to discuss something about Emma. We found our therapy hamster in her backpack, and there were marks on it. Injection marks. And a notebook documenting its stress responses to different stimuli." My stomach dropped. I thanked her for telling me, and hung up so she wouldn't know I was having a panic attack. I wanted so desperately for the situation to fix itself, and luckily, it did. Because that evening when I confronted Emma, she had tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Perth has been targeting me since day one. She thinks I'm creepy because I ask questions. Check the hamster. I bet there's no marks." She was right. When I demanded to see the hamster, it was completely fine. No marks. No notebook either. Emma had never lied to me before. Even about the cat, she'd admitted it immediately. So I believed her. I took her out of the group that week. Surely the therapist and softball were enough of a support network, right? And a month later, Emma said something so insane my heart almost burst. "I made a friend. A real one," she exclaimed with a huge grin. She showed me a picture of a boy named Charlie. Scrawny, glasses, probably freshman year like her. "He's in my school. He's perfect. I mean, he's perfect for me." The way she corrected herself made my chest tight, but her eyes seemed genuine, almost soft. I remembered being 14, how intense first crushes felt. Maybe this was what she needed, a real connection. I met Charlie that Friday when Emma invited him over. He was everything I'd pictured. Quiet, anxious, picked at his food. But he smiled when Emma talked. After pasta, I told them they could hang out in the living room while I cleaned up. I wanted to give them space, but keep them in sight. I was scrubbing dishes when I heard a thud, then silence. The type of silence that only happens when something's wrong. I found them by the couch. Emma had a plastic bag wrapped around Charlie's head, her full weight on his chest. His face was dark red, eyes wide and unfocused, legs barely twitching. I shoved her off, but his body was limp. No breath, no pulse. I tried CPR while screaming at Emma to call 911. She just stood there, calm. "He didn't even try to push me off," she laughed. "I knew he wouldn't. That's why I picked him." My hands shook uncontrollably as I dialed. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. I forced words through my constricted throat while Emma walked to the kitchen sink and washed her hands methodically. She dried them on the dish towel, then returned to stand beside me, tilting her head at Charlie's motionless form. The dispatcher kept asking questions. I gave our address 3 times before she understood through my gasping. Emma reached down and smoothed Charlie's hair, adjusting his glasses so they sat straight on his still face. Her movements were gentle, almost tender. She glanced at me with those calculating eyes. She moved Charlie's arm so it draped more naturally across his chest. Then she positioned his legs straight, parallel to each other. Her efficiency made my skin crawl. When she grabbed a throw pillow from the couch and placed it under his head, I nearly vomited. She was staging him. The sirens grew louder. Emma sat cross-legged beside Charlie, taking his hand in both of hers. She began rocking slightly, practicing different expressions in the reflection of the TV screen. First confusion, then shock, finally settling on devastation. By the time the paramedics burst through our front door, she had tears streaming down her face. 2 paramedics rushed to Charlie while a third guided me away. I couldn't stop the CPR motions, even though my arms screamed in protest. They had to physically pull me back. Emma stayed by Charlie's side, explaining in a trembling voice how we were watching a movie, and he just stopped breathing. Her voice cracked perfectly on the word breathing. I watched her unconsciously mirror Charlie's final expression while she spoke to them. The slight parting of lips, the unfocused eyes. She caught herself and shifted back to practiced grief. The lead paramedic worked on Charlie for several minutes before making the call. Time of death, 7:43 p.m. Police arrived as they were covering Charlie's body. 2 officers, one older with gray temples, one younger who kept touching his holster nervously. They separated us immediately. Emma in the living room with the younger officer, me in the kitchen with the veteran. The older officer asked me to start from the beginning. I explained Emma inviting Charlie over, making dinner, letting them hang out. My voice stayed remarkably steady until I described finding them. Then the words tumbled out in a rush. The bag, her weight on him, what she said about picking him. He wrote everything down, but his expression remained neutral. Through the doorway, I could see Emma gesturing animatedly to the younger officer, wiping tears, pointing at the couch where they'd been sitting. She pulled out her phone, showing him something. Pictures from earlier, I realized. Evidence of a normal, happy evening. The officer asked if our parents were home. I explained about Mom's shift at the hospital. He requested her number. While he stepped away to call, I strained to hear Emma's conversation. She was describing how Charlie had been tired lately, how he'd mentioned feeling dizzy earlier, lies wrapped in enough truth to sound believable. My phone buzzed. Emma had already started texting our extended family. Something terrible happened. Charlie stopped breathing. I'm so scared. The messages kept coming. To our aunts, our grandmother, Mom's best friend, each one painting her as the traumatized victim before anyone could hear my version. The officer returned, informing me that Mom was on her way. He said they'd need to wait for her before formally questioning Emma since she was a minor, but I was 18, so we could continue. He asked about Emma's mental health history. I hesitated, mentioning the therapy, the support group incident, the cat. It would help my case, but it would also make me look like I'd been negligent, letting her be alone with Charlie despite knowing her issues. Before I could decide, Mom burst through the door still in her scrubs. She took one look at the covered form on our living room floor, and her legs buckled. Emma flew into her arms, sobbing about how scared she was, how Charlie just stopped breathing, how I went crazy trying to save him, but it was too late. Mom held her, looking at me over Emma's shoulder. Her eyes held a question I couldn't answer. Not with Emma right there, not with the police watching. Emma turned her face into Mom's shoulder, but I caught the slight upturn of her lips. Behind Mom's back, her fingers moved. Natural. Selection. She mouthed the words silently. The younger officer suggested Mom take Emma to the hospital to be checked for shock. As they gathered their things, Emma clung to Mom, whimpering about seeing Charlie's face, how pale he looked, how she tried to help but didn't know what to do. Mom stroked her hair, murmuring comfort, already deep in protective mother mode. They left me there with the older officer and the crime scene team that had arrived. I gave my statement 2 more times. Each retelling felt more surreal. The officer asked about security cameras. I remembered my laptop in the living room, the one I used for remote work. It had motion detection software running. I moved toward it, but the officer stopped me. Evidence, he said. They'd need to process it properly. Emma must have noticed it too, because she'd already started her preemptive strike. As the crime scene photographer worked, I heard her voice from outside, telling arriving family members about my obsession with monitoring her, how I had cameras recording her every move. Charlie's parents arrived in a rush of demands and tears. His mother collapsed when she saw the covered form. His father kept asking what happened, how this was possible, why nobody called them sooner. I tried to approach, but the officer held me back. This was an active scene, he reminded me. In the chaos, our grandmother arrived for her weekly Friday dinner, unaware of the situation. She saw the police cars and paramedics and immediately clutched her chest. Someone called for her heart medication. Her pills were in her purse, but her purse was in her car, and her car was blocked by the ambulance. The simple task became a complex production. While everyone scrambled to help our grandmother, Emma took charge of Charlie's parents. I watched her approach them with hesitant steps, wringing her hands. She spoke softly, telling them how Charlie was her first real friend, how kind he'd been to her, how she couldn't understand what happened. His mother, desperate for any connection to her son's last moments, pulled Emma into a fierce hug. The cat started yowling from somewhere. In the chaos, nobody had fed it. It was Mr. Pinelli's replacement cat, the one he'd gotten after Emma poisoned the first one. He'd asked us to feed it while he was away for the weekend. Another responsibility in a night full of them. The officer said I couldn't leave the scene yet. Emma volunteered to handle it. She extracted herself from Charlie's mother's embrace with gentle touches and promises to share photos of Charlie from earlier. As she walked past me toward the back door, she paused. Her expression was perfectly crafted concern, but her eyes held that familiar coldness. She returned minutes later later, shaking her head sadly. The cat had somehow gotten out, she reported. Must have been all the people coming and going. She'd put food out and hoped it would come back. Another lie, probably. Another small cruelty in a night full of them. Mom's friend Catherine arrived to pick up her daughter who was supposed to sleep over. She took in the scene, police, paramedics, our grandmother being tended to, Charlie's parents sobbing, and immediately focused on me. I must have looked as destroyed as I felt because she pulled me aside, rubbing my back. She mentioned how strong I'd been since Dad left, how much I'd taken on with Emma, but everyone had breaking points, she said gently. The comparison to my breakdown after Dad's abandonment stung. That's how I looked to her, not like someone whose sister had just murdered a boy, but like someone having another mental health crisis. My laptop sat on the coffee table, its camera facing the couch where everything had happened. The motion detection software would have caught it all. Emma's attack, Charlie's struggle, her confession. But when I mentioned it to the officer, Emma piped up immediately. She'd noticed me recording her and Charlie earlier, she said, watching them through the camera while I was in the kitchen. It made her uncomfortable, but she didn't want to embarrass me in front of her friend. The implication was clear. I wasn't preserving evidence. I was a creepy older sibling who'd been spying on my sister's innocent date. The younger officer made a note. When I protested, tried to explain about the security software, I sounded defensive, guilty. The crime scene team bagged my laptop. They'd analyze it, the officer assured me. But Emma had already poisoned the well. Whatever they found would be viewed through her lens. Obsessive sibling monitoring sister's every move, possibly even recording minors without consent. My phone kept buzzing. Emma's initial texts had done their work. Family members asking if she was okay, if she needed anything. How horrible this must be for her. A few asked about me, but only in the context of whether I was supporting Emma through this trauma. She'd established the narrative before I could say a word. I tried to text Mrs. Perth about the hamster incident. Maybe if she knew what happened, she'd come forward about what she'd really seen. But my frantic messages probably looked exactly like what Emma was claiming. Harassment, instability, desperate attempts to shift blame. I deleted them before hitting send, but the damage was done in my mind. The house filled with more people. Charlie's extended family, our aunts and uncles, Mom's co-workers who'd heard the news. Each arrival gave Emma another audience for her performance. She cycled through grief, shock, and fear with practiced precision. Sometimes she'd catch my eye mid-sob, and I'd see that flicker of satisfaction. Child Protective Services arrived around 10 p.m. They needed to assess the situation, ensure Emma was safe. The irony almost made me laugh. They asked for her medical history, her therapy records, any relevant documentation. Mom was too sedated from shock to provide coherent answers. The information would have to wait until morning. I sat in our kitchen as they processed our living room. Through the window, I could see neighbors gathering outside, whispering among themselves. Tomorrow, it would be on the neighborhood Facebook page, the Nextdoor app. Every local gossip chain would have their version of events, and none of them would include the truth. Emma found moments to twist the knife. When she brought Charlie's mother water, she made sure to mention how Charlie had been teaching her to play Minecraft, how they'd been planning to start a server together. She showed his parents their Discord conversations on her phone, innocent messages about homework and games, carefully curated to show a sweet friendship. What she didn't show were the messages I knew must exist, the ones where she'd been testing him, pushing boundaries, seeing how much control she had, but I had no proof. Just the certainty that Emma never did anything without calculation. The medical examiner arrived to take Charlie's body. As they wheeled him out, Emma broke down again. This time she collapsed completely, hyperventilating about seeing him leave, how final it was. The paramedics checked her vitals, suggested she go to the hospital for evaluation. Mom agreed immediately. Before they left, Emma hugged our grandmother, whispering something that made the older woman pat her head sympathetically. She hugged each of our aunts, Charlie's parents, even the officers, building her network of support and sympathy with each embrace. When she reached me, she hesitated. The room watched, waiting to see if the traumatized girl would embrace her older sibling. She stepped forward slowly, uncertainly. When she wrapped her arms around me, she felt small, fragile. To everyone watching, it looked like a scared child seeking comfort. Only I felt her fingers dig into my back. Only I heard her whisper. She pulled back with tears in her eyes, touching my face gently before returning to Mom's side. The perfect victim, the grieving friend, the scared little girl who'd just lost someone special. She'd won this round before I'd even understood we were playing. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, the older officer informed me I'd need to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. They'd have more questions. The laptop would be analyzed. The scene would be processed. Everything would be done properly, he assured me. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Emma had already written the story. Unstable older sibling, recently traumatized by father's abandonment, possibly having another breakdown, obsessive monitoring of innocent younger sister, paranoid accusations during a tragic accident. She'd given them a narrative that was easier to believe than the truth. The house emptied slowly. Charlie's parents were the last to leave, his mother clutching the photo Emma had given her, a selfie of Emma and Charlie from earlier that evening, both smiling at the camera, happy, normal, the last image of their son alive, courtesy of his killer. I stood in our empty living room, staring at the spot where Charlie had died. The carpet showed no signs of violence, evidence. No evidence of the horror that had happened there. Just like with the cat, just like with the hamster. Emma knew how to hide her tracks, how to make truth look like lies, and lies look like truth. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Emma. "Thank you for trying to save him. I know you did everything you could. I love you." Attached was a photo, her at the hospital, looking small and broken in the emergency room bed, Mom holding her hand. The perfect ending to her first act, but I knew there would be more. This was just the beginning of Emma's performance, and I was the only one who could see the strings. The question was whether anyone would believe me, or if Emma had already won. Tomorrow would bring formal statements, investigations, questions, but tonight, Emma controlled the narrative, and I stood alone in a house that still smelled faintly of pasta and death, knowing that my sister had murdered a boy and framed me for negligence in one elegant move. The cat never came back. I found its body under the back porch 3 days later, but by then, nobody cared about one more small tragedy in a week full of them. Emma had bigger game now, and I was running out of time to stop her. Emma's grief counseling sessions started the following week with Ms. Rodriguez, who'd been my English teacher sophomore year. She'd transitioned to social work after getting her master's degree, and Emma specifically requested her. I realized why during the third session when Ms. Rodriguez pulled me aside afterward. She held a folder containing photocopies of essays I'd written for her class years ago. If you guys haven't already, please like the video. One about family stress after Dad left, another about feeling responsible for Emma's development, a third describing my fears about failing as a substitute parent. Emma had found them in our shared Google Drive and printed them out, highlighting passages about my control issues and obsessive need to monitor Emma's every move. The detective assigned to Charlie's case called me in for another interview. Detective Chen sat across from me in the small interrogation room, sliding printed screenshots across the table, text messages I'd sent to my best friend when I was 17, venting about teenage frustrations. One particular message stood out in yellow highlighter. "I could strangle her sometimes. She drives me absolutely insane." Emma had provided these, along with a detailed timeline of my escalating aggression toward her. The detective asked me to explain the context. I tried, but every explanation sounded like an excuse. Every clarification made me seem more unstable. Our grandmother started visiting Emma daily at the house while I was banned from being there during Emma's recovery period. After 2 weeks of these visits, Grandma's story began changing. She'd mentioned details that didn't match reality, like insisting I'd been at work the day of Charlie's death when I'd actually been home. Emma would gently correct her, patting her hand sympathetically while shooting me meaningful looks. The Ring doorbell footage from the Johnsons' house 3 doors down became crucial evidence. It showed me arriving home at 5:47 p.m. and Emma arriving with Charlie at 6:15 p.m. The gap proved I'd been home alone before they arrived, which Emma's lawyer used to suggest I'd had time to plan something. The footage showed nothing of what happened inside, but the timeline became another piece of Emma's narrative. I continued gathering evidence on my own, screenshotting Charlie's social media posts before his family could memorialize the accounts. His last public post, made 3 hours before his death, showed excitement about spending time with Emma. But I also found older posts where he'd mentioned feeling overwhelmed by her intensity, quickly deleted comments about her being a bit much sometimes. Emma's softball coach posted on Facebook about the team's upcoming memorial game for Charlie. In the comments, she mentioned how sad it was that Emma had quit the team 2 weeks before Charlie's death due to family stress at home. This contradicted Emma's timeline of events, where she claimed to have been at practice the day before Charlie died. I screenshot everything, but when I tried to present it to Detective Chen, he warned me about interfering with an active investigation. My former therapist, Dr. Martinez, received a subpoena for my records. Emma's lawyer wanted documentation of any statements I'd made about sibling violence or family dysfunction. The therapy I'd sought after Dad left to deal with my anxiety was now being weaponized against me. Charlie's memorial service took place 2 weeks after his death. I attended despite Mom asking me not to, sitting in the back row. Emma delivered a eulogy that had the entire congregation in tears, speaking about Charlie's kindness and how he'd been teaching her to see the good in everyone. Halfway through, I noticed my phone in my jacket pocket was recording. I hadn't started it. When I tried to stop it, Emma's eyes found mine across the church. She'd seen me fumbling with the phone and incorporated it into her speech, mentioning how some people couldn't even respect Charlie's memory without trying to create drama. The police required me to attend supervised visits at the station to provide additional statements. These sessions meant sitting in the same building where Emma was also being interviewed, passing her in hallways, seeing her smirk when no one else was looking. During one visit, she made sure to walk past the window of the room where I was waiting, holding up her phone to show Charlie's photos as her new wallpaper. When Charlie's mother saw it later that day at the station, Emma broke down about how it helped her feel close to him. Mom's co-worker Janet, who'd been supportive initially, suddenly became distant. Her husband worked in hospital administration and had heard rumors about an anonymous complaint regarding missing medication from Mom's floor. The implication was clear: supporting our family could have professional consequences. Janet apologized privately, but said she couldn't risk her job with 3 kids to put through college. Emma's lawyer contacted contacted me with a plea offer. If I agreed to provide context about my negative influence on Emma's development, she might plead to involuntary manslaughter instead of fighting the charges. My refusal was immediately reframed in court documents as preferring to see my sister get life in prison rather than taking any responsibility for the family dysfunction that contributed to the tragedy. The autopsy results revealed something I hadn't known. Charlie hadn't died from strangulation as I'd assumed. The cause of death was suffocation, and the bruise pattern on his neck came from his own hands, trying to pull the plastic bag off. This detail made Emma's claim that he just stopped breathing even more sinister, but it also meant my initial statement about what I'd seen was technically incorrect, which Emma's lawyer used to question my reliability as a witness. Both Emma and I discovered Charlie had been making TikTok videos about dealing with toxic friendships, saved in his drafts. But when investigators accessed his account, the videos had been edited. What I thought was evidence of Emma's concerning behavior turned out to be part of Charlie's video project about reformed bullies and giving people second chances. Emma had somehow accessed his account and modified the content before anyone else could see the originals. Mom faced an impossible choice. The Department of Children and Families informed her that if she continued to believe I was a danger to Emma, she could maintain custody. But if she supported my version of events, Emma would likely be removed from the home. The night she made her decision, she called me crying. She couldn't lose both of us, she said. She chose to keep the child she could save. Being banned from my childhood home meant losing access to potential evidence. I started reaching out to parents of Emma's classmates, trying to gather information about her behavior at school. Most were polite but distant, clearly uncomfortable with my questions. A few mentioned their children had said Emma was different since Charlie's death, but none would provide written statements. I ran into Emma's lawyer's assistant, Melissa, at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She was on the phone, complaining about her workload. I overheard her mention that Emma's psychiatric evaluation was scheduled for the next morning. This information helped me time my own evidence submission to coincide with the evaluation, hoping the psychiatrist would see the pattern of behavior I'd documented. Before Emma realized I still had access to our shared family Google Photos account, I downloaded everything. Years of photos showing her progression from a curious child to someone who studied people like specimens. Pictures from family gatherings where she stood apart, observing rather than participating. Screenshots of her various notebooks and lists, including one titled Emotional Response Catalog, with detailed notes about how different people reacted to various stimuli. Charlie's divorced father emerged from his grief with anger. He wanted to sue our family for wrongful death, adding another layer of legal complexity. Fighting both criminal and civil cases simultaneously meant I missed my own psychiatric evaluation appointment, which the court had ordered as part of the family assessment. My absence was noted as non-compliance with treatment recommendations. My credit cards maxed out from hiring a private investigator to look into Emma's activities at school. Meanwhile, Emma used Mom's Amazon account to order books about grief, trauma, and healing, making sure the delivery drivers saw her reading them on the front porch. The performance never stopped. A confrontation at Charlie's favorite boba shop turned public when I encountered Emma there with classmates, playing the role of the grieving friend trying to feel close to Charlie's memory. My presence caused a scene that traumatized the teenage employees. The incident made it onto social media, framing me as the unstable sibling harassing a grieving child. I lost my job at the bookstore after customers complained about feeling unsafe around me. The owner apologized but said he couldn't ignore multiple complaints. The person hired to replace me was the mother of one of Emma's friends, someone who'd been vocally supportive of Emma on social media. Living in my car while Emma redecorated my old room as a grief sanctuary felt like a cruel joke. She posted photos of the transformation online, explaining how she needed to create a space to process her trauma. The room where I'd spent years trying to raise her right became a monument to her manipulation. Mom begged me to stop investigating, to let Charlie rest in peace and get help for what she called my delusions. The word hit hard because I could see how it looked from the outside. Every piece of evidence I gathered could be interpreted differently. Every action I took to expose Emma made me look more unstable. My investigation had unintended consequences. When I shared evidence with Charlie's best friend Marcus, hoping he'd corroborate Emma's concerning behavior, his parents discovered our communication. They complained to the school, and Marcus was suspended for sharing harmful content about a fellow student. The stress of the suspension and potential legal ramifications caused Marcus's parents to separate. Knowing my investigation was traumatizing, Charlie's friend group weighed on me, but stopping meant letting Emma win. I pushed forward, even as more families asked me to leave their children alone. The harm I was causing in pursuit of justice became another weapon Emma could use against me. My last supporter, Mrs. Chen, who'd taught both Emma and me in elementary school, asked to meet with me. Over coffee, she gently suggested that Emma might just be a broken child dealing with trauma in unhealthy ways. When I tried to explain the pattern of behavior going back years, she looked at me with such pity that I couldn't continue. How could I explain Emma's calculated cruelty without sounding cruel myself? In a moment of desperation, I publicly admitted to failing Emma by not getting her help sooner. I thought taking responsibility might make people more willing to listen to my concerns. Instead, it undermined my credibility further. Emma's lawyer filed court documents citing my admission as evidence of my guilt and negligence. Going through old messages, I found texts from Charlie sent weeks before his death, casual mentions of Emma being weird or intense that I'd dismissed as teenage drama. One message in particular haunted me. Emma's acting strange lately. She keeps asking hypothetical questions about trust and loyalty. Should I be worried? I'd responded that Emma was just socially awkward and he should be patient with her. Emma's lawyer used my own evidence against me, filing a motion to try Emma as a juvenile rather than an adult. The motion argued that my systematic harassment and persecution of Emma proved the family dysfunction that contributed to Charlie's death. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered became proof of my obsession rather than Emma's guilt. Understanding Emma's motivation required admitting uncomfortable truths. She'd felt abandoned when Dad left, and I'd been too caught up in my own pain to see hers. Her questions about helping people who couldn't help themselves had been a genuine attempt to understand why Dad hadn't stayed to help us. But somewhere along the way, that abandonment had twisted into something darker, a need to matter completely to someone, even if it meant destroying them. To access Emma's early therapy records, I had to break into Mom's home office while she was at work. I'd promised her when Dad left that I'd never violate her trust. Breaking that promise felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But in those records, I found documentation of Emma's early signs of conduct disorder that predated Dad's leaving. Fighting Emma required becoming calculating and cold, everything she'd accused me of being. I had to think 3 steps ahead, anticipate her moves, use people's emotions against them. I hated who I was becoming, but it was the only way to hit her at her own game. I manipulated the trust of Emma's only remaining friend, Sarah, to access Emma's current journal. Sarah thought she was helping me understand Emma's grief. The betrayal of using an innocent girl's compassion felt like poison in my veins, but the journal contained crucial evidence about Emma's premeditation. Small victories felt hollow. When I proved Emma had lied about her whereabouts the week before Charlie's death, it didn't bring satisfaction, especially when Emma broke down in court about how much she missed Charlie, and I found myself crying too. We stood at his locker after the hearing, both of us grieving in our own twisted ways, her for the loss of her experiment, me for the boy I'd failed to save. Emma's counter-accusation gained traction among those who couldn't reconcile the sweet girl they knew with the monster I described. She claimed I'd groomed her into violence through years of true crime documentaries and discussions about abnormal psychology. The fact that I'd bought those books about conduct disorders became evidence of my obsession with making Emma into something she wasn't. Everything hinged on Mrs. Perth agreeing to testify about the hamster incident. She'd moved out of state after leaving the support group, and tracking her down took weeks. When I finally reached her, she was reluctant. Her husband had taken a job with a company that contracted with the hospital where Mom worked. Testifying could jeopardize his position. I used my past relationship with one of Emma's classmates, a boy I'd tutored in math, to pressure his mother into providing information. When she refused, I reminded her how I'd helped her son for free when they couldn't afford a tutor. The look of disgust on her face when she realized I was leveraging past kindness made me sick. Her son later asked me why I wouldn't help Emma the way I'd helped him. Mom's hospital colleagues chose sides based on shift politics and union dynamics rather than truth. The night shift supported Mom and Emma, while day shift workers who'd known me longer quietly expressed doubts. But expressing doubts and testifying were different things. Most chose silence. The prosecutor explained that without physical evidence, convicting a 14-year-old would be nearly impossible. Juries sympathized with children, especially those who appeared vulnerable and remorseful like Emma. Character evidence and circumstances weren't enough. We needed proof of premeditation that couldn't be explained away. Charlie's mother became my strongest ally, using her grief support group connections to find others who'd noticed Emma's concerning behavior. She reached out to Charlie's youth pastor, his teachers, his gaming friends. She called in every favor, pushed every connection, driven by a mother's need for justice. One support group member had security camera footage from a nearby park where Emma and Charlie had met several times. The footage quality was poor, but it showed Emma practicing something with a plastic bag weeks before Charlie's death. The woman who provided it couldn't testify due to her immigration status, but the footage was something. The footage revealed something heartbreaking. Charlie had known Emma was dangerous. In one video, he could be seen stepping back when she moved too close, keeping physical distance while still engaging with her. He'd been documenting her behavior in his own way, taking screenshots of concerning messages, saving voice recordings of their conversations. He'd known and come anyway, thinking he could help her. Charlie's hidden phone backup, stored in a cloud account his parents didn't know about, contained the evidence we needed. Weeks of messages where Emma had tested boundaries, asked increasingly disturbing questions, and expressed frustration when Charlie showed empathy for others. But it also showed Charlie's responses, patient, kind, desperately trying to guide her toward normal human connection. The backup revealed Charlie's final days spent in fear, but determined to save Emma from herself. His last journal entry, written the morning he died, said he believed everyone deserved a chance at redemption. He thought if he could just show Emma what real friendship looked like, she might change. He'd chosen to risk himself for someone he saw as lost rather than evil. Realizing Charlie's true intentions changed my approach. He hadn't been a naive victim, but a knowing sacrifice. He died trying to save my sister, and honoring his memory meant fighting not just for punishment, but for the treatment he'd believed Emma needed. Emma's overconfidence finally created the opening we needed. In her court-ordered therapy journal, she wrote about her practice sessions with the hamster and cat, describing them as necessary steps in understanding mortality. She'd been so certain the journal was confidential that she'd admitted to years of preparation. Her therapist was legally required to submit it as evidence of potential harm to others. When I presented the evidence in court, I felt no satisfaction. Emma realized she'd been recorded and documented far more than she'd known. The moment she understood she'd lost control of the narrative, her mask slipped. For just a second, everyone in the courtroom saw what I'd always seen, the calculating coldness behind the performance. The pattern became undeniable. The hamster, the cat, then Charlie. Each death more sophisticated than the last. Each victim chosen for specific qualities. The hamster for its vulnerability, the cat for its trust, Charlie for his empathy. Emma had been practicing not just unaliving, but the performance that came after. Both sides prepared for the final juvenile court hearing. Emma's lawyer argued for mental health treatment rather than incarceration. My lawyer pushed for the maximum sentence allowed for a juvenile. The community divided sharply, with some calling for compassion for a troubled child and others demanding justice for Charlie. The courtroom packed with classmates, teachers, and both families forced to sit in proximity. The seating chart itself showed the community's division. Emma's supporters on one side, Charlie's on the other, with a few uncertain souls in the middle. I sat directly behind the prosecutor, where Emma could see me throughout the proceedings. During a break in testimony, I noticed Emma unconsciously rubbing her thumb and finger together, the same motion used to hold a plastic bag closed. She caught me watching and immediately stopped, but I'd seen other tells throughout the trial. The way she tilted her head when lying, the slight smile when she thought she'd scored a point. The jury hadn't noticed these details, focused instead on her tears and trembling voice. Truth emerged through careful presentation of evidence. Charlie's journal entries, Emma's therapy admissions, the security footage, text messages showing escalation. Each piece built on the last, creating a picture that even Emma's performance couldn't obscure. Mrs. Perth finally agreed to testify despite her husband's job concerns. She sat in the witness chair, clutching a cross necklace, and told the court she'd prayed about her decision. She couldn't lie about a dead child, she said. She described finding the hamster in Emma's backpack, the injection marks, the detailed notes about its stress responses. Just interjecting here, this is requested reads. Please subscribe for more content like this. Emma's lawyer tried to discredit her, but her quiet dignity and obvious reluctance to testify made her credible. The security footage from the park proved pivotal. Frame-by-frame analysis showed Emma practicing with plastic bags weeks before Charlie's death. She'd timed herself, adjusted her grip, tested different approaches. The prosecutor presented it methodically, letting the images speak for themselves. Emma's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed it. Charlie's journal entries painted an increasingly disturbing picture. He'd documented Emma's questions about death, her fascination with control, her tests of his loyalty. One entry from 3 days before his death described how she'd asked him to hold his breath until he passed out to prove he trusted her. He'd refused, noting her disappointment. The tech teacher who authenticated Charlie's phone backup testified reluctantly. He confirmed the metadata showed no tampering, though he emphasized the collection method raised privacy concerns. Emma's lawyer seized on this, but the judge ruled the evidence admissible given the circumstances. During Emma's psychiatric evaluation results presentation, the court-appointed psychologist detailed severe attachment disorder stemming from Dad's abandonment. She explained how Emma's inability to form healthy connections had morphed into a need for absolute control. The evaluation revealed Emma genuinely believed relationships required complete submission, viewing Charlie's death as his failure to prove devotion. Emma's therapy journal became the prosecution's strongest evidence. Page after page documented her experiments with the hamster and cat, clinical observations about their stress responses, detailed plans for escalating to human subjects. She'd written about selecting Charlie specifically because of his empathy and eagerness to help others. The journal's most damning entry came from the week before Charlie's death. Emma had written about her frustration with his boundaries, how he kept refusing her tests, how she needed to find a way to make him understand what real trust meant. She'd drawn diagrams of the living room, marking camera angles and blind spots. When confronted with her own handwriting, Emma's composure cracked. She began rocking in her chair, insisting the journal entries were fiction, creative writing exercises for dealing with grief. But the dates preceded Charlie's death by months. The prosecutor highlighted entries from over a year ago describing her first experiments. Mrs. Perth's testimony proved devastating to Emma's defense. She described finding the hamster in Emma's backpack with clear injection marks, jokes, the detailed observation notes, Emma's lack of remorse when confronted. She explained how she'd initially doubted herself when the hamster appeared fine later, but now understood Emma must have substituted a healthy hamster. Emma's lawyer attempted damage control by arguing these were the actions of a disturbed child crying out for help. He presented Emma's academic achievements, her volunteer work, testimonials from teachers who'd never seen concerning behavior, but the evidence had shifted the narrative beyond recovery. Charlie's mother took the stand to deliver her victim impact statement. She described her son's compassion, his belief in redemption, his determination to help Emma despite his growing fear. She read from Charlie's final journal entry about choosing love over self-preservation. The courtroom fell silent as she explained she wanted Emma to receive treatment, honoring what Charlie would have wanted. The judge ordered a recess before final arguments. In the hallway, Emma approached me while her lawyer was distracted. She tilted her head in that familiar way, studying my exhausted face. Her fingers moved subtly, spelling out words only I could see. Natural, selection, failed, test. Then she smiled and returned to her lawyer's side. During closing arguments, the prosecutor laid out the pattern of escalation, the premeditation, the calculated performance after Charlie's death. He emphasized that mental illness might explain but couldn't excuse unaliving. Emma needed secure treatment, not freedom to find new victims. Emma's lawyer made an impassioned plea for rehabilitation over punishment. He argued that Emma's actions stemmed from untreated trauma and abandonment. With proper treatment in a therapeutic facility, she could learn healthy relationships. Sending her to juvenile detention would only create a more dangerous adult. The judge took 3 days to deliberate. When we reconvened, the courtroom packed again with the same divided community. Emma sat perfectly still, hands folded, playing the part of the remorseful child one last time. But I caught her checking the exits, calculating distances. The verdict came down carefully balanced. The judge found sufficient evidence of premeditation, but acknowledged Emma's age and mental health issues. She sentenced Emma to secure psychiatric treatment until age 21, with regular evaluations for potential release. If treatment proved unsuccessful, she'd be transferred to adult facilities. Emma's reaction was subtle but telling. No tears, no breakdown, just a slight nod, as if the outcome matched her calculations. She turned to look at Mom, who sat crying quietly, and mouthed something that might have been sorry or might have been weak. The community's response split predictably. Charlie's supporters felt justice had been served, while Emma's defenders saw a child failed by the system. Graffiti appeared on our house within days. Some called us monsters, others victims. Mom had to take leave from work as the hospital dealt with the controversy. I met with Charlie's parents one final time before they moved away. They'd decided to start fresh somewhere without memories on every corner. Charlie's mother hugged me, whispering that she didn't blame me for Emma's actions. His father remained distant but civil. They were establishing a scholarship in Charlie's name for students studying psychology. Mom and I attempted reconciliation over stilted dinners at neutral restaurants. She'd aged years and months, her hair more gray than brown now. We talked about everything except Emma, the elephant always in the room. She mentioned considering selling the house but couldn't imagine starting over. The restraining order paperwork arrived 2 weeks after sentencing. When Emma turned 21, I'd need protection. The lawyer explained it was standard procedure for cases involving juvenile facilities. Sign here, initial there, except that my sister would always be a threat lurking in the future. My job search proved frustrating. Background checks revealed the case, and even sympathetic employers hesitated. The bookstore owner offered to write a recommendation, but we both knew my name was poison in our small town. I'd need to move, start fresh like Charlie's parents. Sarah, Emma's former friend, reached out through Instagram. She apologized for giving me Emma's journal, said she felt guilty for betraying Emma's trust, even knowing what Emma had done. I told her she'd helped save lives, but she blocked me immediately after. Another bridge burned in pursuit of justice. Mom's house stood empty most days while she worked longer shifts. I'd drive by sometimes, seeing Emma's bedroom window dark. The room she'd turned into her grief sanctuary now held evidence boxes and legal documents. Mom couldn't bring herself to change it back or clear it out. 6 months after the verdict, I received a letter forwarded through Emma's facility. Her handwriting hadn't changed, still precise and controlled. She wrote about her treatment progress, the skills she was learning, how she understood now that what she did was wrong. The therapist probably required the letter, but the last line was pure Emma. I'm becoming exactly who they want me to be. I burned the letter in the kitchen sink, watching her words turn to ash. Mom found me there an hour later, still staring at the charred remains. She didn't ask what I'd burned. We both knew Emma would always find ways to reach out, to remind us she was still there, still calculating. The scholarship committee invited me to Charlie's Memorial Fund first event. I declined, knowing my presence would overshadow Charlie's memory. His parents sent photos anyway, bright young faces eager to understand human psychology, to help troubled children. Charlie would have loved it. Moving day came with little fanfare. A studio apartment 3 states away, a customer service job that didn't require background checks, a chance to be anonymous. Mom helped me pack, both of us pretending this wasn't goodbye. We'd text, call, visit for holidays, but we both knew Emma stood between us even locked away. My new neighbors knew nothing about Emma or Charlie. To them, I was just another 20-something starting over. The relief of anonymity felt like breathing again. No suspicious looks, no whispered conversations, no social media posts about the murderer's sibling. 3 years passed in careful peace. I built a quiet life, made surface-level friends, avoided anything that might reveal my past. Then the call came. Emma had made remarkable progress. The facility was recommending supervised release at 19 instead of 21. The board wanted family input. I submitted my statement opposing release without appearing in person. 2 weeks later, the board approved Emma's supervised transition to a group home. The restraining order meant she couldn't contact me, but I knew she'd find ways to track my life. Emma always found ways. Mom texted that Emma seemed different, genuinely changed. Therapy had given her tools to manage her impulses. She was studying for her GED, planning to pursue social work to help other troubled teens. Mom wanted to believe in redemption. I wanted to believe Charlie hadn't died for nothing. The news about Mr. Pinelli's new cat reached me through old neighborhood Facebook posts. Found dead in his garden, no clear cause. Could have been anything. Cats died naturally all the time. But the timing, just weeks after Emma's release, felt like a message only I would understand. I changed apartments again, updated security measures, varied my routines, maybe paranoid, maybe prudent. The restraining order was just paper. Emma had learned to play the system, to show them exactly what they wanted to see. She'd always been patient, calculating, willing to wait for the perfect moment. Life continued in this vigilant peace. Work, home, careful normalcy. I dated occasionally but never seriously, unable to explain the weight I carried. Friends remained distant acquaintances. Every unexpected knock, every unknown number, every figure that looked too long brought momentary panic. 5 years after Charlie's death, I stood at his grave for the first time since the funeral. Fresh flowers lay there already, a small card tucked beneath. I didn't need to read it to know who'd left them. Emma had always known how to send messages. I left my own flowers and drove away, checking mirrors more than necessary. The scholarship recipients thrived, going on to careers in psychology, social work, victim advocacy. Charlie's legacy lived through them, his belief in redemption creating ripples of positive change. Sometimes I wondered if Emma followed their progress too, studying what Charlie had wanted her to become. Mom retired early, moving to a coastal town where no one knew our history. We met for lunch when I could manage it, conversations still dancing around the permanent wound between us. She showed me photos of Emma's supervised activities, her volunteer work, her apparent transformation. I smiled and nodded, keeping my doubts silent. The final letter arrived on Charlie's death anniversary, forwarded through 3 addresses, despite the restraining order. Emma's handwriting remained unchanged. She wrote about understanding natural selection differently now, how Charlie had evolved past physical survival to something higher. She was studying his example, learning what he'd tried to teach. She signed it, "Your loving sister, always watching over you." I kept that letter as evidence, just in case. Emma had learned to hide better, to perform more convincingly, to wait longer. But she was still Emma, still testing, still selecting. Charlie's death had taught her patience, not empathy. The system had taught her to mimic recovery, not achieve it. Some nights I dreamed of Charlie, always trying to save someone who couldn't be saved. He'd known the danger and chosen love anyway. His sacrifice had revealed Emma's nature to the world, protecting future victims even as it cost his life. That knowledge brought cold comfort, but comfort nonetheless. I built my life in the shadow of that history, forever vigilant, forever separate. Emma served her time and played her part, but we both knew the truth. She'd evolved into something more dangerous, a predator who understood the system, who could perform redemption while planning her next selection. The restraining order would expire eventually. Emma had always been patient, but I'd evolved too, learned to protect myself, to trust my instincts, to maintain boundaries even when it meant isolation. Charlie's death had taught me that some people couldn't be saved, only contained. Emma was contained for now, performing rehabilitation while I performed normal life. Both of us waiting, watching, knowing this dance would continue until one of us stopped breathing. The scholarship fund grew. Charlie's parents added donations from their new community. Young psychologists entered the field with his story as inspiration, determined to identify and help the next Emma before tragedy struck. His legacy became prevention, education, awareness, everything he'd wanted to give Emma, given instead to those who could receive it. I kept his photo in my wallet, a reminder of the price of misplaced faith and the power of documented truth. Emma might still be out there, might still be planning, but Charlie's evidence had stopped her once. His journal, his backup, his careful documentation had revealed what I alone had seen. In the end, he'd saved me even as I'd failed to save him. Life continued in this careful balance. Work, vigilance, surface connections, always watching for signs of Emma's influence. She'd proven that evil could wear a child's face, speak in a sister's voice, hide behind tears and trauma, but she'd also proven that truth, persistently documented and courageously presented, could prevail. Charlie's scholarship recipients graduated, started practices, began identifying troubled children early. Each success felt like Charlie reaching through time, saving kids he'd never meet. Emma might have unalived him, but she couldn't unalive what he represented. The stubborn belief that understanding could prevent tragedy, that documentation could reveal truth, that sacrifice could inspire change. I lived quietly in that legacy, forever marked by failure, but committed to honoring Charlie's memory through vigilance and truth. Emma remained out there, performing redemption while planning selection, but Charlie's evidence had exposed her once. If needed, it would again. Some dances never ended, just paused between movements, waiting for the music to resume. Thanks for reading this story with me. What a wild ride from start to finish. Comment, we don't care if you're first, if you made it to the end. Just kidding. Love you guys. Peace.